Here's Greg Kukul to explain why it's perfectly fine for folks who never have the opportunity to be saved by Jesus to never get into heaven.
So how do you respond to the problem of the unevangelized? This was actually one of the questions that my brother brought up when I first discussed with him. Okay. I don't know how familiar you are with my story, but he became an atheist about 5-6 years ago, and that's what sent me on this journey in apologetics. So, for instance, this is basically the way that he put it. There's a guy in Africa, he's never heard the gospel. How is this guy automatically condemned to hell to suffer eternal torment?
Okay,
you know, how
so
is
I'm
that a
going to
just
role play
picture?
the tactical game plan here. But not because I'm trying to be fancy-pantsy here. Because this is naturally the way I do it. So describe for me precisely the problem as your brother understands it.
Well, the problem as I understand it is that some people whom Yahweh supposedly deems guilty of sin get an opportunity of reprieve from their punishment, and some people do not. And what separates those who get this opportunity from those who don't is entirely arbitrary. It is contingent upon the time and place in which they live. Not only are folks who are never reached by the gospel denied this opportunity, folks who died before Jesus was born are denied it as well. Are we to believe that the heroes of the Old Testament are all in hell? Is that where Noah is? Is that where Moses is? Is that where Abraham is?
I followed what he said, but that's just a factual statement that how is this guy going to hell? So what is the problem here? What would be the problem if you want to play your brother for a moment here? What would be the problem? Notice, by the way, I'm sipping out of the role play for a second. I'm asking a clarification question. I want to get more information. I want to see what you understand about how our system works, because I think a proper understanding of our theological system solves the problem. It may not be psychologically satisfying to some people, but I think there's a solution there. But I want you to talk a little bit more and give me a clearer idea.
So there's two ways that I'll respond. And the first way is how I think he would have responded in the conversation, which is to say that that's just immoral. That would be the first way. The second way, I think, which is more sophisticated.
Wait, what would be immoral about it? What would be immoral?
It would be unjust.
Unjust how? What? Tell me that, and I'm not being contentious here. I'm saying, what is the precise nature of the injustice? What would he say? That the person goes to hell because he never heard of Jesus, so it is in virtue of a geographic accident that he is punished? Is that the way you think?
I suppose.
Well, then you misunderstand Christianity, because nobody goes to hell, according to Christianity, because of a geographic accident. What do you understand the basis of judgment to be from the Christian perspective? I'm role-playing now still.
What
do you understand? Okay, you know, in Christianity, there's judgment, right?
Right.
Okay, so what is the basis of the judgment? Do you think the basis of the judgment is whether people have heard Jesus or not?
I would say he'd probably say yes.
Okay, well, that's a misunderstanding, and I'm sorry you think it this way. If you go to the end of the story, okay, and there's a judgment, and it says there in the judgment, all the people are before God, everybody, all the people you're concerned about, and you're rightfully concerned about, they're all standing there before God, and everyone is individually judged. What are they judged by? It says right there. They are judged according to their behavior.
That's very interesting, because I have heard Christians claim that Christianity is not what they call a works-righteous system. By this they mean that your works, in other words your behavior, is not what determines whether you get into heaven or not. Now this is a Protestant idea, and I couldn't find any mention of Greg's denomination anywhere, so maybe he's a Catholic, and maybe he believes that Christianity is a works-righteous system.
According to their deeds. Jesus said that every casual word that you speak, you will give an account of in the day of judgment. Okay? So now here's my question of you.
So we're both role playing.
I'm just giving Bob, I'll call you Bob for the sake of discussion. I don't know what your brother's name is, but just say Bob. So my question of you, Bob, is this person that you have in mind who has never heard of Jesus, do you think this person has done any wrong things in their life that they need to answer for? What do you think?
Probably.
Yeah, that would be probably an understatement. I mean, if they just did 10 wrong things a day from the time they were 10 to 60, so on either end of that, we'll give them a free ride, but just those 50 years, you got something like 186,000 infractions of the law. That's just 10 a day. And, I've had 10 against me just during this conversation, just so you know. So in this particular case, if this person gets judged as guilty, how would that be unjust? Notice the question there. The claim is that it's unjust.
Right.
So I'm asking, how is that unjust if given the person's guilt, regardless of whether they've heard of Jesus or not?
What's unjust is that some people are arbitrarily granted an opportunity for reprieve, while others are arbitrarily not granted any such opportunity due to temporal and geographical accident.
Right.
So how is that unjust?
So at that point, I'd have to throw up my hands. Bob is throwing up his hands. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the theology here is that people don't get condemned because they rejected Jesus. That's not there. That's not there at the great white throne judgment. They are condemned according to their works. And this is all through the New Testament, okay? Lots of places, And that's the grounds or the basis for the judgment. So even a person who never hears about the remedy is still responsible for their own behavior before a sovereign, all right? And so there's no injustice here. Now, somebody may say, well, it's not fair because they didn't hear. Well, are you presuming that if they heard, they would have bent their knee?
Of course, not everybody who is offered the opportunity for reprieve will take that offer. But is Greg assuming that absolutely everybody who hasn't heard of Jesus would have declined to accept him as their Lord and Savior? Wouldn't it be entirely reasonable to infer that at least some of the people who never had that opportunity would have taken it? And wouldn't it be unfair to distribute such an opportunity arbitrarily? Wouldn't it be unfair for someone to be denied such an opportunity based solely on the fact that they were born in the wrong place at the wrong time?
And receive the mercy that is being offered? How would you know? Anyone who knows that would be God. And I'm pretty convinced that anybody who would do that, God would get the message to them.
Okay, so Greg is convinced that all of the people who died before Jesus was born and all of the people in the uncontacted communities in Africa and the Americas would not have accepted Jesus anyway. First of all, wouldn't it be a weird coincidence that, for example, all of the inhabitants of the Americas who died prior to Columbus's arrival were never going to accept Jesus anyway, but as soon as the missionaries started to arrive and successfully convert people, that's when the first convertible people on the entire continent suddenly appeared? Secondly, doesn't saying that not a single pre-Columbian inhabitant of the Americas was savable seem a bit problematic, to say the least? Doesn't that seem a bit prejudicial?
That's another theological issue. But all I'm doing now is addressing the question of the injustice. And notice how, we're out of the role play now, but notice how I'm using my questions, because I know what's wrong here. I know there's a wrong assumption about Christian theology, okay? And there's a charge against Christianity. It's unjust. Okay, tell me precisely what is the nature of the injustice. And I noticed, even in your case, you're thinking, I don't know how to answer that. Because people make these charges as if the charge is completely obvious, and who would miss this? But then when asked to spell it out, they have a hard time. Even the problem of evil. Okay, well, you got a problem of evil, right, Christian? What's the problem? Well, there's evil in the world. Yeah, I'm glad you think there is. Okay, well, you're in God, you got God, right? So there's the problem. What exactly is the problem?
Well, the problem of evil is that a perfectly good God would only not prevent all evil if he were not all-powerful. And an all-powerful God would only not prevent all evil if he were not perfectly good. The standard response to this is that Yahweh wanted people to have free will, and that giving them that free will meant that there was always a chance that they would use it to choose evil. This response doesn't really satisfy me because I don't see why, if evil is the price we have to pay for free will, that this is a price worth paying. I would rather be a perfectly good person who has no choice but to be perfectly good than be free to choose evil things. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.